Hey guys, this is NCS Fan 001 here for episode number 20 of Fallout Cookbook Recipes. I hope that I've got the camera at the right elevation for this. Anyway, today we are actually making my take on the Blamco mac and cheese. I think this recipe is definitely a little bit better than the one in the book, plus it requires far fewer ingredients. So that's what we're doing today. This recipe only requires 5 ingredients. You're going to need cream, heavy cream for that matter, elbow noodles, or I guess you could really use any type of noodle you want, extra sharp white cheddar cheese, Jarlsberg cheese, which I have no idea what it actually is, and Parmigiano Reggiano cheese, aka some kind of special Parmesan, I believe. That's my assumption as to what it is. Now, I will say that this variant of the recipe is not particularly cheap. I mean, the cream isn't that expensive, and the noodles you can get for pretty cheap. And even extra sharp white cheddar isn't overly expensive, but this Parmigiano, Reggiano, whatever it's called, and Jarlsberg are both pretty expensive per serving. So if you're doing this, you may want to consider maybe substituting one of the more expensive cheeses for something else if you're doing this exact recipe. So the first step is to pour the full 1 pound box of elbow macaroni into the pot and place that over heat. So while that's cooking, that's when we're going to shred the cheese. So I will be back once I have gotten all the wrappers off of these different cheeses. Alright, so now that the cheeses are out of their packages, we can go ahead and put the pot on the stove. I don't think I need to show boiling water, boiling pasta. I hope most people understand how that works by now. So we need to let that cook. You can obviously let it be more al dente, or you can get it softer if you want. It doesn't really matter. So the next step we have to do, move that, is to get the cheese grated. So I did not buy shredded cheese, I have grated cheese. I'm going to go ahead and put the heavy cream back in the fridge because we won't need it until a bit later. Now you might wonder why I have a knife here. It's because the Jarlsberg has this paper on the outside of it for whatever reason. So I'm going to carefully chop off that little bit of the cheese so we don't end up eating paper. Yeah, I hope you guys are going to like this recipe. This is the one that me and my family use. I think it's pretty good. Like I said, it can be a little bit expensive, and you'd actually probably be better off if you were doing this recipe to have probably twice the number of noodles. There won't be quite as much cheese, or just even use half as much cheese as I'm using. You could probably do it either way and be fine. And perfect, we got all the papers off. So now, the next thing we have to do is shred the cheese. So I've got a bowl set up right here. Oh great, there's water right there. Well, it's not in the bowl, so it's okay. So I have my little hand shredder thing. So I'll probably speed all this up. So now you don't need to use all the cheese at once, and you could always use more noodles instead if you wanted to make bigger servings. But I'm just going to do it this way because this means more cheese, which is always better. More cheese flavor is always better. So the Jarlsberg is a bit larger, so I'm going to pretty much cut it in half, grind it twice. This grater works actually very well, because this is what I used to make this when I was in Cincinnati, because I don't usually make this for dinner. I mostly make this for work, to take to work for lunches, because that's obviously much cheaper than going out and eating somewhere, even fast food. So it's a good, reasonably cheap, I mean it's going to be cheaper per serving than like a fast food place or anything, so. Most likely, unless maybe you're just getting off the dollar menu at McDonald's. So now the next step is to wait until the pasta is done cooking. And it's not really even boiling yet, so I'll be back in a little while, guys, with that step. Okay, the pasta is pretty much slightly more cooked than al dente, so it's about where it probably needs to be. So I am going to drain this. Go ahead and drop your heat down to a low temperature. You're going to need it to stay on for this next step. So I'm going to drain this and then be back in a moment for the last step. And now we have a thing of cooked pasta. There's still a little bit of water leaking out, but it's only falling on the floor, so it's okay. Dump that back in. So now it's on low. Now we are going to add the heavy cream and the cheeses. So you're going to want to add the heavy cream first. Let it settle in there a little bit. So I've got this little like milk carton sized thing of heavy cream. Never that great at opening these things. I would recommend you want to get a carton about this size. There's also that, not Land O'Lakes, but it's like another like common brand. So you want to get one about this size and use about half of it on the mac and cheese. You don't need more than half or else it's not really going to dissolve well. Although if you feel like you need more, you can always add more. I'll leave it right next to me just in case I end up being wrong, because that is a little bit smaller of a carton than I'm used to. So now we start adding in the cheeses, which looks good in this bowl. So I am probably going to end up speeding this up a bit, but you want to add in a couple handfuls at a time. Sprinkle it around in there, mix it. So the mac and cheese is coated in the cream and the cheese. Should all melt onto it together. And repeat this process until you are out of cheese. So like I said, if you want to use either half as much cheese or 2 boxes of noodles, you won't get as much cheese per bite, I guess, but it will be a lot cheaper per serving. So if you're really trying to make this like constantly and for a lot of people, then you should probably consider doing it that way, just to save some money, because like I said, the Jarlsberg and the Parmigiano cheeses are a bit expensive. Even like probably cheaper variants are relatively expensive. I would say this is going to make about 6 good lunch-size servings, so that's actually not terrible for the price, because I mean the noodles and the cream and white cheddar aren't overly expensive. Okay, actually, I might use the rest of that cream. This is a smaller container, and I am seeing a bit of a difference because it's sticking together a little bit more, so I'm going to use some more of the cream. That actually is definitely a smaller carton than what I'm used to, because usually it ends up being a little overflown with the cream, or it just feels like there's too much in there. That's actually a very good amount of it. That's right around where it needs to be. Maybe like a teaspoon or a tablespoon too much, but it's all good. All right. That is looking pretty good. I know that the light may not do it that well with where I'm sitting at, but it looks pretty good. It smells good, and I know it's going to taste good. So now I'm going to portion it out into little Ziploc bags for my lunches. I don't eat this for lunch every day. I'll take other things on other days, like burgers or sandwiches or stuff like that, or even just eat like some peanuts or almonds or something at lunch instead. So I'm going to portion this out for myself and be back for a taste test with the last little bit of it. So guys, I gotta say, looks pretty good. I'm sure it's gonna taste great, but let's give it a try. All right, let's give this homemade mac and cheese, Blamco mac and cheese, a try. Like I said, I think that you're gonna find this recipe to be better than the one in the cookbook, even though the one in the cookbook was good. Delicious. It's got a very cheesy flavor. It's nice and creamy. It's done properly. I think that this is, like I said, a better version of the one in the book. It's also probably easier to make because it's fewer ingredients. But that's just my opinion. So hope you guys enjoyed this video, and see you guys next time for another new recipe.